Hello, welcome to this new episode of D2Africa Stories, your podcast on the scientific leadership in Africa. I'm Iluria Funu. I'm here today to inspire you with this profound discussion with an inspiring researcher and talented research leader who has managed to move from his home country to secure groundbreaking funding to do stellar research while on the continent. Yes, I really mean the continent, the small continent, the Cameroon country. Yes, I really mean the continent, Cameroon, you get it. So he managed to do groundbreaking research in Cameroon and is now creating new drugs on the continent. So I'm very impressed by his story, and I hope you are going to be inspired by what he's going to share with us and what you're going to learn. And before we go deep in the discussion, I would like you to give me a favor. I would like you to join the 30% of our audience who have not only listened to the conversation, but are also there to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This subscription helps us more than you could imagine. And with that, we have more chance to reach out to more brilliant researchers, to more brilliant African scientists to help you becoming the greatest version of yourself and contribute to a better Africa. Without further ado, let's go to the episode. Thank you. Fidel, who are you and what are we going to learn today?
My name is Fidele Ntie-Kang. I work in the University of Douala in the Department of Chemistry, and I also lead the Center for Drug Discovery. I'm founding member of the Cameroon Academy of Young Scientists, and today we are going to learn about the journey through science, how a young scientist coming from a developing country can make impact in the world.
Thank you, Fidel. So you've made incredible stride in the scientific community, and you are really a beacon of leadership on the continent and even around the world. When you look back at your journey, what were the defining moments that made you realize your mission to reach up to Bill Gates Foundation and building your own unit in Cameroon?
Yeah, the first step was when I was going to secondary school, and when I was going to secondary school, I was just 12 years old. And I remember my dad accompanied me to get a vehicle. And when I sat there and he made his finger like this, he says, "You have to be like this." He spoke to me in my local language and he said, "You have to be like this." And that I will never forget because I know the challenge it took my dad to go through. It was raining, it was in September, the beginning of school year, and to go through the rain and to get to the park, the motor park, and to tell me you have to be like this. So it's the first time I was going to stay away from my parents for a long period because I always grew with my parents. And this time around, I was going to live in a dormitory in the secondary school. I'm going to meet new people and all that. So that support was very important and was very emotional for me because each time I went to school and I was looking like I'm not representing what my father promised. I promised my father I would be like this. Then I often thought about this, and each time I had results from school and the results were not the very best, I would be like, I'm not being like this. And so I always tried to be at the top of the class. And then at the time when we were in school, when you were the first of the class, you had to be a class prefect. So you're a class prefect, and so because you're a class prefect, you don't participate in manual labor. So you're the one to assign people for manual labor, and you supervise. It was some kind of leadership that you had to learn. And if you were the class prefect, you are exempted from certain things, you know. And so it was a nice thing for me. Then I got to from four to pass from five. It was the school prefect. You have to be a school prefect. Like you are now no longer a class prefect. You are now a school prefect. So we were helping the school in the governance, in the managing the students, the younger students, and so on. So it was also very important for me. Then a turning point came when I left high school and when I had to register at the University of Douala. It was a different culture altogether because all along I was in high school in English, in the English part of Cameroon. And then we crossed the bridge, as they say, we crossed the bridge to the other side of the country. And these large classrooms is not like when we were in high school, where few of us, like not up to 80. Now it's like 500, 600 of us in the class. chemistry, physics together with mathematics, and you have to meet up with all these guys who studied originally in French. So you have to learn more French at the same time you're learning the science, and they don't write things the same. Like where we want to write 2.5, write 2.5. With Francophones, they write 2.5. And so this is, of course, in the chemistry, I was quite good because I knew the experiment, but the way they report and the way they write exams are a bit different. So this adaptation was very, very important. And then I got the DR, as the course you call it, DR. Anyway, there's another challenge before I got the DR. It's when I got a matrice, because I got a matrice in organic chemistry. And even though my project was in using NMR and molecular modeling, I won the award. I was the best student in my batch. I was the first mention bien, and I was very happy. And being Anglophone and being mention bien was for me very excellent. And then I won this competition they call the Brain Trust competition, which was given by the Minister of Higher Education. They selected the best students in the university. We went together and competed 2004. So Famen Dongo was the minister. He came and gave us this big plaque, and I was so happy because I have the picture and excited by this. And then for 2 years, I didn't have a registration for the DOA because the only professor in the department retired, and so the others were lecturers, and they could not have a core doctoral with lecturers. They needed someone of magisterial rank. So I was in the quartier for 2 years, as we say, the quartier. So 2 years I was teaching secondary school and waiting to get a core doctoral registration. So eventually I got registration in CEPAMOC, Center for Atomic Molecular Physics and Quantum Optics. Imagine a student from organic chemistry to go and do matrice in organic chemistry, to do DI in atomic physics and molecular physics. It was a big, big challenge for me. And but the good thing is that it was on scholarship. Professor Patton Jock believed in me. And I was the first and the only chemist who ever went there. So sitting down to study second quantification, whereas second quantization, whereas I've not studied the first concept quantization. Quantum physics was tough, but we made it through. It was 1 year, rigorous year. And from there, I got a UN scholarship. So the UN scholarship took me to the Center for Science, International Center for Science in Trieste, in Italy. And from there, I got another scholarship, DAAD, to Germany. So by the time I was getting my PhD in CEPAMOC, I had 15 publications, and it was a record and it remains a record. So I could make it in French, study in the French system and emerge as the best student in the class, mention bien, then got my PhD with 15 publications. So that is how I got positioned at University of Douala. And first of all, an instructor, part-time instructor, became an instructor. And then to get assistant lecturership, they had to be an open position. So I was more or less publishing more than even senior scientist, but I was not, my career could not advance because you are an instructor. So you're not an assistant lecturer. So you cannot be promoted. You can only be a senior instructor forever. And there were some other senior colleagues who were instructors before us. So we're like, I'm wasting my time somehow. But the good thing is I got the Commonwealth Fellowship to the UK. And after the Commonwealth Fellowship, I got a Humboldt. So the Humboldt Fellowship took me back to Germany, where I met my professor, Wolfgang Sippel. And when I was coming there, I told him I wanted to do rehabilitation in Germany. Rehabilitation means you qualify to be a professor. So while I was there, I was teaching master students in Germany and also doing research and publish in good journals. And my professor is very rigorous when it comes to quality of work. So eventually, with Humboldt Fellowship, I could stay in Germany, teach in Germany. My family came over, my family, and eventually got my habilitation. But before I got the habilitation, I was now eventually recruited at the University of Douala as an assistant lecturer. So I was promoted to senior lecturer. So with the German habilitation, I qualified to be an associate professor. So that's how I became an associate professor. So I didn't spend a number of years as a senior lecturer to become associate professor because I was qualified by the German habilitation. And then the second turning point is what happened when the COVID lockdown came. During the lockdown, there were many opportunities and many challenges. Of course, we seized the opportunities, and we use the challenges as stepping stones to seize the opportunities. What do I mean by that? The whole world was on a standstill, and there was a need for new drugs to combat this disease, this pandemic, and all those things. So I got a letter from the Gates Foundation, and they said they had to award what they call the Callistus Juma Science Fellowship. They wanted top flight scientists in Africa, and they had to pre-select those who apply. By what method, I don't know. But I happened to be, they wrote me a personalized letter. Dear Fidel, we are writing to you as a computational chemist, and we want to offer this opportunity and all that and all that. Long email. I didn't read the email fully. I thought it was a scam. I didn't read the email. I just write Jeffrey. I said, "Oh, this is one of those just jokes that Gates Foundation give me $1 million to do work." And I continued. 2 weeks afterwards, I got a reminder email. Fidel, did you read our previous email? Then I
Yeah.
got to my wife and I was like, "Oh, this thing seems to be serious." I've get the second email, but she said something. She said, "If you don't apply, others will apply, and if it happens that they are giving the money, then the others will get it, and so you lose nothing by by applying."
Exactly.
So I wrote back a response to the email and asked, is it like an individual award or is it going to be a consortium? Because almost all the applications, and in fact, we had just failed, we had just had a $5 million application as a consortium that failed, an NIH grant. So I was still digesting the failure. So I like, is it going to be another consortium? And I know the amount of work we put to write this grant. And they said, no, you can choose who to work with. The important thing is that you are going to be the PI and the majority of the money must be spent in Africa. But you must have a groundbreaking idea on how we can use computational chemistry to battle the pandemic. And that was it. So I contacted my colleagues and my who could participate in the project, and we wrote a strong application. The university gave us the support letters, and we submitted within the deadline. You like to submit 2 days before time. So the last day, you don't say there was a problem with the internet and all that. So you need to record a short 2 minutes video and write a couple of things. We did all that, my CV and all this, in my journey through science. And lo and behold, I was called up that I went through phase one. And then I started breathing this time. I started inspiring myself with more confidence because phase one was a challenging part. You were pre-selected. You don't know why you were pre-selected. And 83 of us were pre-selected. And there was going to be seven awards for all of Africa, 55 countries. So here are we, phase two now. We have to go for an interview. I am invited for an interview for the first time, and there are these top scientists. I've been reading their names only on publications, and they're the ones to interview me. They were asking me questions from biology to chemistry to physics to mathematics, everything about drug discovery. And I'm just a chemist, and I have to answer all the questions. They're asking me to explain how the screening of compounds takes place in the library, in the lab. It's, all along, I've been saying my compound was screened. I've never screened the compound. So I have to ask. They ask me the details of the experiments and all that. So after the second, because there were two interviews, after the second interview, I was really discouraged. I told my boss that the way I'm seeing things is like they don't want to give me the grant. He said, why? He said, why? I'm a computational chemist. You invited me as a computational chemist. Why do you ask me a question about what happens in the flow cytometer or what happens in the biosafety cabinet? Things like that. So I think they were trying to pull me to see how far my strings can go.
Yeah.
And of course, you are going into an interview for the 5 minutes interview, and the internet is unstable for 30 minutes, and you have
Yeah.
to answer all the questions in 15 minutes. Eventually, part of the time, the internet was not working, but all the same, we got the grant.
Okay.
So it
So
was one of those miracles that happens.
yeah.
And for those who
So
know me personally, they know I'm a person with very deep faith. And if I believe in something, I don't give up. And
okay.
that's how it happened. We were selected,
Yeah. So
and
can
then,
you?
of course, the rest is history.
Yes, can we pause first on loan because you've mentioned like your journey from when you were in high school, you were leaving your parents to live alone, and that your father told you to be a good
Yeah.
student or a good kid, and this touched you to the point that whatever you were doing, you were thinking about, am I the way my parents want me to be? If not, you were changing yourself to keep being on track of what your parents insufflated you to be. And things going well, you started being as a leader, like prefect of classes and then prefect of school, where you had some kind of leadership role. Since high school, you were helping, like you had some kind of exception that prevented you from doing some work that you didn't like, and you were charging other pupils or colleagues to do the work, and this gave you some kind of leadership skills again. And you move from high school to University of Douala because you are living in Cameroon at this point in the part that is speaking English only. For those who don't know Cameroon, that is a bilingual country with one part speaking mainly English, another part speaking only French. So you move from the English part to the French part for the university study in chemistry, and you arrive in a school university where we have not 80 students but 500, 600 students in class, and you have English and you hear French. So you had to translate back everything, learn the science, also trying to figure out the knowledge, the information in French, and trying to find out your way out in your during your university studies. And you happen that at the end of your masters, if I heard well, you had to wait on hold at the end of the master, wait on hold for 2 years because there were no professor in chemistry to open the doctoral school to allow you to do your PhD back home in Cameroon at the University of Douala. And you move from your chemistry to do physics. Okay, so another challenge got entered there again. So you have to learn physics, mixing it up and trying to find out your way. But still, you had good marks, you had some prizes, and you got fellowship that allow you to move from Cameroon to Italy, then to Germany, where you finally secure your PhD and your professorship position, if I heard well. And then went back to Cameroon, where you were now established as assistant professor, associate professor. I heard at the University of Boya in the English part of the country this time now, and where you had the chance to do your research and to up to securing a groundbreaking study project from the Bill Gates Foundation, where they had a during the pandemics they were calling only best researcher to do some kind of stellar science, and you were among this researcher and you submit your application, and at the end of the day you got selected despite all the challenge you had because they were asking you a lot of questions across all the fields. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. So in your story, you can see the resilience. You can see that you were already focused in your destiny, like your parents show you where you were supposed to go. And these were your target in your mind, even without you knowing it. You can see the resilience. You mentioned the adaptability that you had to adapt yourself, adapt to the French, adapt to the English, all these things, even Italian now, Dutch, all these things you have to learn physics and still during the pandemics, you had an opportunity. You were supposed to you could have cry and say, okay, I don't have jobs. But you use the challenges again and you find a solution in the spot. So there's a lot of things here that are really admirable from the perspective of us African who are already we are always complaining about what we have or what we don't have. I mean, many scientists or many African scientists now are always complaining that I don't have this, I don't have that. So that's why I'm not that this person. So now you are showing us that you even with the small you can have or what you don't have, you can still aspire for greatness. So that's what is something inspiring there. What is creating this change, this belief in you? Like you've created your breakthrough in research. What are you doing when you have self-doubt? Because this happen also. How do we overcome this doubt?
Yeah, if I understand well, thank you very much for the question. The driving force, the inner drive. Yeah, you sometimes tell yourself there are challenges in the continent. And everywhere we go, big challenges. It's enough to land in the airport, then you start meeting bumpy roads and you start meeting trash filled on the streets. You start meeting children try stopping your car to sell something. This is the same everywhere in Africa. And you find disease and find challenges. And you tell yourself, if nobody makes a change, the change will never come. That if something must start, it must start somewhere. And that somewhere may be me. That if you study under certain conditions doesn't mean everybody must study under such conditions. And if you have seen better and you have known better, it's an opportunity that has been given to you to make change where you can make change. So that if each of us can bring change in our own small sphere, the collective change is going to be enormous. Yeah, I give you an example. The first time I walked into a lecture room in Germany to teach master students, it occurred to me that my name, the last name, sounds Chinese. So when the timetable was put up, it was what was on the timetable was FN Kang. So no one knew I was African. Then I walk into the lecture room and I meet students sitting there waiting for the lecturer, and they thought I was one of the students. And then when I come in front, I'm connecting my laptop and I'm connecting to the projector and preparing myself for the lecture. That's where it dawned upon them that I'm supposed to be the lecturer and I'm supposed to teach them. I'm supposed to examine them. I can tell you most of these students probably may have been taught by an African for the first time. And so I had the opportunity to let my students know that Africans are smart people enough or I fail the whole continent. So I had 54 countries behind my back. And the first impression that most of my students, as I said, some of them were going to be taught by an African for the first time. And it's obvious I'm African. And I had the opportunity to raise the entire continent or to fail the entire continent. So I prepared my lesson so well. I read for lessons, checked my slides, made sure there were no errors on them, went through again and again several weeks before my lecture. If in fact the day before my lecture I didn't sleep, I walked through the whole night. And that first lecture was an icebreaker. I established myself from day one. And I knew this because later on, when I was filing for my habilitation, the students had to evaluate me. And the good thing about Germany, like most developed countries, is that it's an open system. So all the evaluation, including the students' statistics, because an online evaluation, so you don't know who wrote what, an anonymous evaluation. They downloaded everything and sent to me by post. So I opened my envelope and I have a letter from the international office of the university, the evaluation of my students. And I had to read what they wrote about me. So if I was a mess, they would write I'm a mess because we don't have any contract with them. They just being who they are. Of course, they didn't give me an A. They gave me a B plus. They said very nice things about me. A few things that I need to improve, which I did. Among them things was that I was a fast speaker. I speak fast. So I would say that that aspect is very important to know, to have the sense of responsibility as a person of color, as I say, a person of color representing an entire continent. That's the first thing I took note of. The second thing is adaptability to the work environment. As you as you might know, I moved from chemistry to physics. Then when I got to my postdoctoral work, I was in the Institute of Pharmacy. I was not in the postdoctoral school of physics or biochemistry. In the Institute of Pharmacy, there's a huge deal of biology. You don't only make the chemistry or make the compounds or understand how they interact with the proteins or so, but you need to know how they interact in the cell and in the organism. So you need to know the biology. So I need to do extra reading in the Institute of Pharmacy because we have the seminars, everybody comes together. Someone is giving a seminar in German, another one is giving a seminar in English, some is intensive in biology, some is intensive in machine learning models and things. So you have to understand, and the interaction is so nice. You saw how the whole drug discovery process comes together and fits together. So for me, this was very important. So at the end, I got habilitation in pharmaceutical chemistry. It was not physics. It was not. It was not so at the end, when I got to the University of Boya, our university had a program in pharmaceutical chemistry, and so a minor, that's the minor course. The students graduate in chemistry and have a minor in pharmaceutical chemistry. So more or less, I saw this as an opportunity to pass on some of the knowledge and experience I had from Germany to the students. So I see two things here. I see both the challenge you see as a person, and the society requires that you should do well, and that's in just Germany. You don't do anything less than excellent. So I needed to prepare properly, and the second thing was the level of adaptability. When I went into the biology lab for the first time, it was during my this fellowship I got, the Kalisto Juma Science Leadership Fellowship. It was it was in the US. I went to the biology lab the first time. I was going to culture cells because that's not my training. I had to culture my own cells, incubate them, I had to prepare them for the assay and all. My benchmate was an undergraduate student, year two student in the university. I was an associate professor. So I do something crazy and he will remind me that that's not how they do it because I'm not used to a biology laboratory. So it's the first time I was working with incubators and things. So to say that you can always learn. You can always learn. And that experience was good for me because now when I have my colleagues in biology, my virologists, when they're showing me their data, their results, I understand better. Before I just give them my chemistry, my simulation. But now we can have a proper conversation because I have been immersed in that. So later on, we'll organize a training program in University of Boya. My colleagues come over to train my students. I'm one of the trainers because I've gained experience there.
Yeah, so that's
I don't know if that answers the
yeah.
question.
That's perfectly. I understand that you feel that you are invested by your color, by your background, by your race, everything to do something more. You're not doing it for you, but for other people who come after you. So you feel invested by this why, this purpose.
Yeah,
But you need the courage to do what you are doing also. How can,
sure.
as an aspiring scientist in Africa, let's say in Bachelor, like you say, develop the courage to push through that toughest moment and this difficulty that the society sometimes expect from us?
Yeah. The first thing is every challenge is an opportunity. Every obstacle is a stepping stone. I repeat myself. Every challenge is an opportunity. Every obstacle is a stepping stone. COVID came, and through COVID, we found a way of screening compounds from African medicinal plants against the virus. So, but if the pandemic was not there, we would not have this research opportunity. So, I see every challenge as an opportunity. I'll give two examples. The first example is that I was settled in Germany, I was invited by a colleague who has a collaboration in Benin to come and give a talk. And this talk is I had developed this database of natural compounds in Africa. So she invited me to come to her lab to give a talk. I came there, I paid my train ticket, we had lunch with them and I gave a talk. After that, they were organizing a workshop in European traditional medicine. And they said, hey, if Fidel comes over with his knowledge of medicinal plants in Africa, he'll be an added touch. I was invited to give a talk. I gave a talk. And they were just about rounding up a project in collaboration with Benin. And then she told me she's moving from that university. She was an assistant professor, junior professor, they call it in Germany. She was moving to become a full professor in another university where she was supposed to start a program from scratch, a master's program in pharmaceutical biology. And she said, "Can you design the contents of a course on drug design?" So I'm very happy. Of course, there are many books on that. So I put together a course content on drug design. It went through the university council, and they approved the course. And then she writes back to me and say she's very excited to say the course content was approved. I said, wow, great. So she said, but so when are we starting to teach? She said, I thought I was just designing a course program. I said, no, you are the one who designed the program. You're the one to teach the course. So I have to take the train 6 hours to the extreme of the east of Germany in the borders with Czech Republic and Poland. So I was to go there one day before time, spend the night in the hotel and teach the students from like 9 o'clock to like 3 p.m. and then come back. So this experience was another one because the students this time around, it was not like in Halle where I was teaching. I was supposed to teach in English because it was an English taught course. But this time around, I had to teach in German. And then it's, of course, there's a difference between spoken German, like what you speak every day, and then teaching a scientific concept in German. So we went to class the first time, and the day before my lecture, she told me, since it's an elective course, it's not a mandatory course by university regulation. I could also teach in English and even examine in English. The condition is that two-thirds of the class must vote that if they prefer the election to be done in German or in English. And then I walk into the classroom. Of course, as usual, day one we have to do an election, and day one I always like the students to have lunch with me together so that we get to know each other better. So at the beginning of my lecture, I start teaching German, and after about 10 minutes or so, I pause, and then I said we must decide whether we want this lecture in terrible German or good English. I said we're going to have this lecture in terrible German or in good English. They say they understand my German. They try to be polite, so we try to understand your German properly. But if you prefer in English, that would be also be good. And I said, yes, this is good because when you go to Cambridge or you go to Harvard, then you don't need to struggle to speak English. So you have a chance to learn the course in English and you get the English terminology. But so I said, I'll teach in English, but each time you have a difficulty, if there's something you don't understand, you just raise your finger and I will explain the concept in German quickly and come back to English. So that is how I was able to convince my students to take the course. And I always love to teach that course. Even when I was in Cameroon, I can teach online. So I was really fascinated by the students. So for me, I believe that as an African, you are not less privileged. I don't think the brain matter we have is less than. We may not have had the same exposure like people from other continents, but the good thing is that we have what it takes to learn. So when you go to a new environment, you can learn, and every challenge you have, you can use as an opportunity, and every obstacle you see in front of you, you can use as a stepping stone. And there's a way you can see an obstacle. right? If you see a big mountain in front of you, the first thing you ask yourself is three questions. How do I get up there? Or, oh, it's impossible for me to go and get up. It's just too hard. Oh, I'll never be able to make it. So it all depends on your mindset. If you ask the right question is, how do I get there? And if you have the answer to that, you eventually get there. But if you say, oh, no, it's too hard, I will never get there, then you probably never get there. So for me, the better way to say is, how do I get there? And if you ask the question properly, you're going to get out the solution.
How do I get there? Thank you, Fidel.
Yeah,
And you say every challenge is an opportunity, every obstacle
yeah,
is a stepping stone, and you are not less
true.
privileged than others. So we
Yeah,
have what it takes to learn, and I
yeah,
will add that our perspective also bring us some kind of new way of thinking that make us different from
yeah,
others and even special from others. That's what me I've experienced, that the way we think is always different from others. And it's always
yeah,
saying like, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about that. So that's something that I
yeah,
really enjoy of being African, and that I see, okay, I'm really coming from Africa. That's why I'm thinking like that. And it always adds something
yeah,
new to the conversation, to the debate,
yeah,
and say,
sure.
okay, wow, that's really interesting. This village is really interesting. So that's what you are
Yeah,
saying, that the way you are doing your things, it'll always look different and special, and it's actually having high value in those who receive it.
yeah.
Thank you, Fidel. I have to,
Can I share small? Can I share small
okay.
experience working with the international office of the university? They were preparing international office of Martin Luther University in Germany. They were preparing a kind of leaflet, and the reason why they were preparing this leaflet is that they observed that the intake of students from Francophone Africa is very low. They realize that they have a lot of students coming from English speaking countries in Africa, but not many from French speaking Africa. So we were invited. I was a postdoc at the time with another Cameroonian student who was a journalistic student. So we went there and we had several conversations and we're designing the flyer on how to present the university to aspiring international students coming from French speaking Africa. And the good thing is, we were told that our contributions and our inputs were going to be very important because there's a knowledge that we have about our environment which they don't have. So for once in my life, I realized that there's something I have, there's an experience I have, which my German colleagues did not have. So they depended on me, and this is very important. That the conversation will be incomplete without me. So my own input counted. And it made me to not just see myself in the campus as one more black man on the campus, but to see myself as a contributor. So when the flyer came out, my name was on it, my picture was on it, and so I was sorry the other Cameroonians who contributed were quite impressed by that. The second experience I'll share also with this is a student. There were several students I taught while I was doing my habilitation. There was a student from Cameroon, there was a student from Nigeria. I'll give you a story about a student from Nigeria. She came from a background of pharmacy. She got a bachelor's in pharmacy, and then she worked in the pharmacy in Nigeria for some time. And she wanted to study, and she applied for the master's in pharmaceutical biotechnology, and she was admitted. And it's very easy for two Africans to meet each other in a class. So I came to teach, and there's a student from Nigeria. So of course, she's different from others. And then we got to know each other and talk and all that. And then when we got to talk, I was asking her about the experiments and the studies. She said on the theoretical aspects, she has an advantage over the other students, but she has little exposure when it comes to the equipment. And of course, I expect that. She says when they are working in the lab with other students, when they're working on particular equipment, the other students don't want her to work on the equipment because they always fear that she'll break down things because she has never worked with such sophisticated equipment. But that on a theoretical concept, she understands the concept a lot better. So I realized that our educational system targets the mind. We want to fill the mind with things, whereas in the Western educational system targets the hands, the skills. So they want to get the skills more because the doing of things, the know-how as they call it. But in our educational system, it's more about the head. We want to feel a lot of knowledge in the head. So yeah, our heads are really full and our hands are not skillful. So that student, as I speak, she works for a pharmaceutical company because she developed a lot of results from her PhD work because she graduated from master's and went and got a PhD position elsewhere. And as we speak, she graduated. She worked on stem cells. She's quite good until BioNTech took her. So she works for BioNTech. And the day she was going to sign her contract, we had a phone call. We had a long conversation. She was sharing me some of the frustrations doing research and all that. But at the end of the day, something stood out: resilience. That if you think that in your university you don't have state-of-the-art equipment, in your lab you don't have what it takes to train students properly, when you find yourself in Europe, don't think you're going to be a failure, because there's something you have, and that something you have is that your head is full. You are well loaded. So when you get to free your hands, very soon you will get. Eventually, you just need some time. You just need some time. So it's just sometimes, just like someone who's learning to drive. The first time you're always trembling, but after some time driving become natural.
Okay.
So once you are immersed in a laboratory and you know how to get things done, before 1 year or so, you are freely going to be working. In fact, they will even allow you sometimes allow you to be the key with the lab over the weekend because you are already familiar with what is happening.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly,
but the
exactly.
knowledge, the theoretical knowledge you have is not useless.
That's so true what you say. I really concur with
Yeah.
that. I just want to know, for those who don't know, what is computational chemistry, because the way you are speaking is so, and I think advanced is an advanced science mainly. And can you break it down a bit for those who does not understand it? For parents who have kids at home and are thinking, what is my son is going to do or what is my daughter is going to do? What is computational chemistry and how do we get there?
Yeah. Computational chemistry is simply the chemistry that make use of computers to predict properties of molecules. So let us say, for example, you want to test the activity of a compound, or you want to measure the conductivity of a metal or a new material you're about to design. Now, the difference between experimental chemistry and computational chemistry is that with experimental chemistry, you need the material in your hands to determine its hardness or its conductivity or whatever. Or if you need a molecule in the test tube to be able to test its activity in an enzyme assay. In computational chemistry, you don't need to have the molecule. You don't need to have the material. You do carry out a simulation. You have models that help you to predict the material, how the material will behave, its tensile strength, its conductivity, and what all the properties that you want to measure, whether they're physical or chemical or biological properties. Then you decide which of the materials you're going to make. In the sense that if I have 1,000 molecules and I want to test them in a lab, in an assay, it takes me, I have to prepare solutions for each of the 1,000 molecules. I have to express the enzyme. I need to get a substrate. I need to carry out the assay to see if my compound is inhibiting the enzyme in the assay. In computational chemistry, I don't need the solid material of the molecule. I don't need the enzyme. I need an X-ray structure of the enzyme, or less a model of the enzyme. Then with that,
So,
I can take 1 million molecules and simulate each of them with the enzyme, and I would now have an idea of which of the molecules have the ability to bind to the enzyme. And if there
yeah.
I find out of the 1 million molecules, I have 15 that can bind to the enzyme. Those are the 15 I'm going to test. So it saves me the time and the stress, and I run less experiments. I do more predictions. So in computational chemistry, you predict what is supposed to be the outcome of an experiment. So it saves
That's
you
nice.
costs and saves you time.
So you're doing chemistry in the lab, in the computer header,
Yes,
and you reduce the time of those who are going to test it to
exactly,
make sure that it's really what you have predicted, if it's working or
exactly,
not.
exactly,
That's great. And how
exactly.
can someone go through that without following your path, chemistry, physics, and all these things?
Yeah,
The normal path, what is it?
yeah. The normal path for you to become a computational chemist is uh, after you graduate a degree in chemistry or in physics, because both paths will lead to the same thing. If you have a degree in chemistry and you have a good background in physical chemistry, that's good. If you have a background in physics, that's also good. Now, when you graduate, typically there are universities that offer programs in quantum chemistry, computational chemistry, and so on. So you can go straight to a master's in computational chemistry, a master's It can even be a master's in chemistry, but the research project is geared towards computational chemistry, right? So at that point in time, you would need a bit of programming. You need to know how to work with packages. There are work packages like most labs nowadays don't need to write their own code. Some of them you have also well-known packages that you simply learn the tutorials and then know which system you're studying. Because the first thing you always hear in computational chemistry projects is system, because there are different. A system is what? A system is just a molecule, more or less. It can be molecular systems. So in essence, it can be small molecules you're dealing with. It can be large molecules like proteins. It can be antibodies. So the key is always know your system. And when you know your system, you know how your system behaves in the biological system. Then you can be able to properly model it. So the modeling goes hand in hand with biology. So it's not enough to have a strong background in chemistry and physics. It's also important to understand the biology, the biological system you are studying. Again,
So
system.
that does that mean that someone from biology go to computational
You
chemistry?
can, you can. So my students right now we have students who come from biology, and then by the time they learn how the software package works, they know how to enter their data and the simulate, because there's a challenge of knowing how your software works, the theoretical background of your software, then how to enter your data in a way that the software accepts it. Then you still carry out the simulation. You have what we call the output. Now, once you have the output, now how do you interpret the results or the output to explain the observed phenomena? Sometimes your work is to explain what has been observed in a wet laboratory. Sometimes your work is to predict what should happen in the wet laboratory. And then when they go and test in the assay, it validates your hypothesis. So in essence, what you generate from molecular simulation or computational chemistry is often what has to be validated. So in some cases, there's an observation in the lab, and they want some molecular explanation at the level of the molecules. What is really happening, and the computational chemist can now bring an added input, like a clarification of the reason why you observe this in the lab is because
Okay, so now,
based on the
so
simulation. So we like hands in a glove. We fit into one another.
so you are using
Yeah.
computational chemistry and drug discovery in your center at the University of
Yeah.
Douala. Can you share with us the key problem you are aiming to solve with your research and how it will directly impact the health challenges we are facing in Africa and in Cameroon in particular?
Yeah. There are many projects we are working on. Yeah, I would say briefly a bit about each of the three main projects we are working on, because we also have projects that are not funded projects in the center, but which we do by collaboration. So as we bring our expertise to collaborate in areas where we are solicited. So we have three funded projects, and one of them is the nature-inspired discovery of novel antivirals. We are working on antiviral compounds, both compounds that target HIV and compound that target the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So that again has impact. And we have a project that is working on what we call pseudo natural compounds. And these are compounds that are built from fragments of natural compounds, which are intended to target HIV latency. That means, many people live with HIV by depending on antiretrovirals, because there's always a pool of cells, HIV infected cells, which are dormant. So each time the active cells are killed with the antiretrovirals, then dormant cells become active again. And so the persons have to live with it all their lives. So we are working on this project where we're finding compounds that can activate the dormant cells and thereby kill them. Then we have this other project that is called the African Derived Natural Product Box. And in essence, this African Derived Natural Products Box is one of our most recent funding. And this is inspired from what we call the African Natural Product Database. Now, so coming to the project about uh, the discovery of antivirals, nature-inspired antivirals. what we do is we are looking for compounds that will block the transmission of the virus, or compounds that will block the main protease, which is very important for the survival of the virus. So we have been able to use computational chemistry, for example, to understand that compounds that bind to what we call the angiotensin 2 site, because the virus is transmitted from one person to another by the spike from the surface of the virus. When it binds to the human receptor that we call the ACE2 receptor, that receptor actually is able to fuse with the spike, and therefore that's a way a virus moves from one person to another. So we realized that we were able to find compounds that will bind to the angiotensin 2 site of the ACE2 protein, the human receptor, and prevent recognition between the human receptor and the viral spike. And we can do that with the computer and explain that. So that's it. So the next thing we have been able to find out is we are now looking for dual inhibitors, the compounds that can both block the spike ACE2 interaction and also block the main protease. So with the computational chemistry, we are able to find compounds that were able to do that job. And so far, the best of the compounds we have had has inhibitory 50% inhibitory concentration of 125 nanomolar, which is not bad. And we are trying to take it to the next level. That means studying the metabolism and all that. So that is what we could do. Now, with the other side, we were able to put together so far compounds in the literature which have been originated from medicinal plants in Africa. We have about 12,000 of them. So we have a database, huge, the largest in the continent, that shows exactly where the species were collected, the herbarium numbers of each species, the traditional use of the species, and also the compounds found in the species, the biological activities. And so we have all that information in one database, which we call the African Natural Product Database. And we now use computational chemistry to more or less simulate the interaction of these compounds with the protective targets. That's one of the things we are doing. Another thing we are doing, of course, as I mentioned before, is that we are now doing what we call pseudo natural compounds. That means, when you go to a natural source, say you go to a forest to harvest a plant, very often you would need to have a sizable quantity of the plant material to be able to find out a few milligrams of active compound. Now, when you have powder the plant material, use the solvent to do the extraction and doing the column chromatography and all the standard techniques we use, at the end you have a few milligrams of an active compound. What happens if you find your compound is very active and your compound could be developed into a drug? The first thing that comes to your mind is the number of people who are sick. They just have a few milligrams of several kilograms of plant material. If you have to cut down the whole forest to treat the people, then you lose your biodiversity. So we quickly realized that the way forward is not to keep hoping that we are going to find a drug from the plant in sufficient quantities to treat the sick people, but that the way forward will be to understand that the active ingredient in the plant, we can synthesize them. But of course, we know synthesizing natural compounds is not very easy because they are very complex. They have many steric centers and all that. So what we prefer is to say, we take the database of compounds, all the molecules present, which we have collected over the years, and we do what we call a retrosynthesis. We come backwards to say, to make this compound, what would be the way to get to this compound? I need to get the fragments. So we break down this compound following some rules of synthesis, and then we are able to find these fragments. And now what we do is, if you have a protein target, we use the computer again to simulate the interactions between the fragments coming from the natural compound and the protein. Okay, and we will see where each of the fragment will prefer to go to. See, this is a protein binding site, and there are three fragments and come from natural compound. This fragment finds itself here. This fragment finds itself here. Preferably find itself here. Now, the question we ask ourselves is, how do I connect them synthetically to form a molecule, beginning from the fragments? And that's what we have been doing. We use computers to simulate the interaction between our fragments and our protein. And we now have to do what we call fragment recombination. We try to recombine these fragments. We have new compounds which were not made by nature. They are not synthetic. They are not natural compounds. They are what we call pseudo-natural compounds. So the first results we are already having, we now have compounds which are indoor charcoals, which we can make from the lab, and we are testing them already in the assay. So, but this would not have been possible without computational chemistry. Yeah,
Wow, you are doing, like you say, stellar science while on the continent. I really mean the continent, Cameroon. you are doing, you are doing stellar science on the continent because this, I don't think it's possible to think like that when you're a young scientist and then you are just thinking of finishing your
yeah,
school. But when you are saying it, that means you are really doing this thing in the
yeah,
country, and that means it's possible for other people to also do that.
sure,
And I'm sure other people are also doing that already.
yeah,
I just have a question about your research because you said that you are creating new drugs based on some kind of existing drugs on the
yeah.
continent and plant and everything. Have you already taken some plant that we know are like in our tradition are supposed to have some relief, if creative effect or preventive effect, like garlics or curcuma or pepper, and also merge them together and see what's happening on the in terms of drugs and all these things?
Yeah, this is a nice one too, actually. In the academia, often they want you to show an active isolated compound and show the activity of the isolated compound and to fully characterize the chemical properties and all that. But in what they do in traditional medicine, no one isolates a compound. They use a powder, they use a decoction, the concoction, whatever they use, they don't isolate the compound. They don't use chemical solvents to separate the fractions and things like that. They don't do that. So it has been challenged us to say, does the way we do science from the Europeans' point of view, is that the way forward? And a couple of questions have come to our minds. And recently, we tried to put together. This is not within this conversation. We put together a kind of supplement, a supplement that contains four medicinal plants, powders, and things for four medicinal plants, some of which are used in our nutrition. They're used in our everyday food. And the idea was to find principles, active principles that could lower blood sugar level. And the first assays were already done with rabbits and things, so typical diabetic models. So right now, one of the things we are trying to see is what proportion of each plant powder should we put together, and so or plant extract should we put together. So this I cannot discuss this because I can discuss detail now, give the names of the plants because this is quite work in progress, and I'm not the only person involved. There are other colleagues involved. So we actually created a company that's called Ethnomedica, and this company we try to get some funds to start to push to get some more results before we can start talking about production and things. So in essence, there's that other side of science that we think is not done the way uh, the typical Western medicine approach should be, like getting a pure molecule, knowing all its metabolites, carry out the drug development process, carry out synthesize analogs and things like that, do clinical trials and yeah. But the question we always ask ourselves is what were our ancestors living on that kept them healthy for many generations. So, and if they were eating this particular food, what's in the food that made them healthy? Sometimes even the way they cook the food, they cooked it different from the way we are cooking it today. And so there are a couple of questions we have asked ourselves. We can talk this actually behind the screens, but yeah, there's a lot that's going on also in that area.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. That's good to know because I know that it's in our culture when someone is sick, we mix everything, aloe vera and everything, and then the person feel better. I say, okay, this is the thing that saved me. So that's something really interesting. But when I see your story, you mentioned chemistry, you mentioned physics, but at what moment did you realize that computational chemistry was the way to go for Africa and for the world, and that you decide to change now?
Yeah, the thing is, when I did my first master's, they call master's one, I was supposed to be working in isolating compound from a plant, medicinal plant. If I would put my sentences straight, I would say I found my destiny because my classmates were working in the labs first before me because the lab space we had available for at the University of Douala was the same lab space we were using to train undergraduate students, the same lab space for the master's students and the PhD students. And so you needed to allow some people to work. So we had to enter the lab in turns. When my turn came, I remember so well I was supposed to work on a plant species called Taxus baccata. It belongs to the same genus like Taxus brevifolia, where Taxol was isolated. So our interest was, can we find some compounds in the sister species growing in Cameroon that has bioactive compounds that could have anti-cancer effects? I had done all my literature work, and at the time I'm about to enter the lab, there's no silica gel, which means I cannot prepare my columns. I cannot carry out chromatography. And so my supervisor came to me and asked me, we didn't know how soon we are going to get silica gel supplied to the lab. He asked me a question, can you try doing some quantum chemistry? I was hearing the word for the first, like quantum chemistry as a research project. That's exactly what it says. We would want to understand some mechanism of antimicrobial resistance, and there's some NMR data that you can interpret with computational chemistry software. I was hearing that for the first time. There's a software called Gaussian. We will introduce you to it. We'll show you how to input your data and how to calculate the parameters we need. And that's how I got my first master's. Then when I got to SEPAMOC, when I was doing the DA, which is master's two, then I had again more exposure on this software. But I was using it this time around to calculate electro-optical properties of different nitrobenzenes. That was again another experience. Now, when I got to the PhD, after my stay in Trieste, I had a fellowship in computer-assisted molecular design, where I was learning how to design molecules that will interact with protein targets using a computer. The first thing is I'm sitting in the lab. I don't smell any reagents. I don't smell any reagents. I don't have to wait for experiments to run. I just sit from my computer. Of course, the price you pay is I sit for many hours. So if you don't go out to run, you're going to put on weight. No? And of course, eventually I'm wearing glasses because I have to sit, look at the computer many hours and write a lot of code. I remember when I was in Germany, I was sitting for so long until my ankles were aching because all the time we were writing things and typing things. But everything always has its plus and minus. And so I would say at every stage along the learning curve, there's something that added to my way of seeing things, which was a bit different from what I'd known before. And I'm grateful that I had these opportunities because my friends who did not go to the Kachi for 2 years after our matrice went to Yaoundé and did they are there enrolled for the PhD, and some of them I became a professor for them because everybody has their own path, and they went to they are in extracting metabolites from plants, and they do what they are doing, and I appreciate them. Without them, I would not have the data I'm using to do my work, right? So they help me somehow to spill out new data, which I now add to my collection, and then I use it to do my work. So in essence, we complete one another.
Okay, thank you, Fidel. So now back to leadership. You say that you were a leader since your childhood. Now you're a leader. You're leading your lab. Your center even. It's not even in the lab. But leadership in science is not just about leading a center. It's also about leading a movement. And you pioneer some effort about interdisciplinary research, like you just mentioned. What qualities do you believe are essential for young scientists listening to us now to cultivate, to become leaders in their field?
The first thing is to be a role model and to take responsibility, because if something is not done, it will not be done. If no one does something, nothing is done by itself. I remember falling when I was writing my first book. The funder was the Humboldt Foundation. The Humboldt Foundation said I would either write the book in German or publish it by a German publisher for me to qualify to get a certain support from them. So I opted to write in English because I have a broader audience in English, and also insisted on getting a German publisher so as to meet the condition imposed by the foundation. And so I wrote to three companies. So actually had an agreement with three because I wrote several emails, and I got Springer, I got Willy, and I got De Gruyter. Eventually settled for De Gruyter because volume one and volume two, and now volume three is being prepared by the same De Gruyter. Now, I happened to talk with one of the editors, and he sent me a sample of a book that they had published, and the book was entitled Scientific Leadership. I devoured this book. It changed my whole mindset. I realized that one of the reasons why scientists are not well understood, and scientists are always complaining that they are not recognized, they're not given the right recognition, is because we learn science, but we don't learn science leadership. We learn science and we don't learn how to communicate the science. The average scientist can only talk to people who have the same discipline like them. When we switch languages, they're lost. If it's a mathematician, he always speaks the language of mathematicians, or just even the language of a select class of mathematicians. If it's a quantum physicist, he only talks to quantum physicists. If it's um, an epidemiologist, it can only be understood by epidemiologists. And the fear of losing our jargon, when we leave our jargon, we are lost. But I have moved from chemistry to physics to pharmaceutical pharmacy, and more or less, and eventually come to one thing. Sometimes it's the way we communicate with one another that makes the difference. So if I learn science communication, communicate science properly, I'll get a broader audience, because I need to speak to people so that people can understand me. If I speak to a minister or a decision maker, they don't know how electrons move. They're not interested in the Krebs cycle. They're not interested in the scientific names of plants. They want to know what solutions can we bring from our labs. And if they don't see what they can lay their hands on, which can help the society and improve the quality of life of the society, they will not find our work interesting. And this is one of the problems with our science communication problems. And so I read that book, and I was still reading. And so when I got the science fellowship, the fellowship did not only give us money to do research, but the fellowship also gave us opportunity to travel. So we go for conferences and workshops where, among us fellows, they bring people to come and do coaching to us, like teach us advocacy, teach us science communication. How do you say all what they are saying in 2 minutes? You walk to a minister of state and he wants to talk about the forest, and he expects you to explain to him how you can save the Cameroon forest from people who are harvesting the forest to do traditional medicine, or how to save the Cameroon forest from those who want to come and buy the back of a particular plant that is very useful in Chinese medicine. How do you talk to them as a scientist within 2 minutes to come, because they don't have all the time. These are issues you were taught how to communicate, how to delegate power, how to be organized as a boss, as a leader. So you are not just a scientist, but you are a science leader. So if you are running 5 labs, for example, you are not an expert in all the five labs. So you have lab heads you employ. So how do you harness all of that together into one being, so into one big center, so they can understand what the head of the lab A and lab B and lab C, and how does all of this fit together towards the overall objective of the center. So this is where the average scientist is missing it, because the average scientist has 2 or 3 persons who speak the language they understand, and that's it. You have three master student, one PhD student, and 4 of you, 5 of you, you're fine, and you go ahead. But you have impact. What does that mean? And so these are the things. I had a very bitter experience, like positive bitter experience. We had this annual meeting in Berlin by the Gates Foundation, no, the Humboldt Foundation, and typically they invite people from different disciplines. So I was trained as a computational chemist. That's the language I speak. And then somebody else walked into our conversation who is into law. Maybe the lawyer and the climate protection person can speak something
Together.
together
Yeah.
on law of
Yeah.
protecting the climate, but then I'm
Yeah.
lost. Okay, so but we need to have a common denominator to have a conversation.
Exactly.
The first thing this lady did is she introduced that person to me and said, "This is Fidel. Fidel is trying to use computers to see if he can find some medicines from plants growing in Africa." And that's exactly what I was doing. But I didn't know how to
You
say
could also
it.
say it. Yeah. Couldn't say it.
And so you would find this happening in the PhD defense when a student comes and gives a wonderful expose to the jury. The jury understand what he's doing. Maybe some member of the jury, maybe his supervisor. Then this grandmother is there.
Nothing.
And those who understand what the only thing the grandmother knows is that after some time they wear him a cap and they wear him a robe, then the grandmother doesn't know what he has done. So how do you explain to your grandmother the relevance of the work you do? So I've learned now to do communicate science.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the first thing to be like to be a leader, like you say, an African leader, you need to be a role model. You need to have science communication,
skills.
and the third one,
Science communication skills and also science,
skills.
I would say advocacy can play a role, science advocacy.
Okay.
But beyond the advocacy, I see more the communication skills are missing. And
Yeah.
how to have a conversation with people who are not of your field.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes this is the big challenge, and it has to do with communication,
I
right?
think. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And managing people, the human aspect of a scientist is often missing.
Okay. So what you said about science communication made me laugh because at the time COVID started, it was a mess because scientists could not explain to the decision maker what they should
Yeah,
do. And they were explaining it the way around and people couldn't
yeah,
understand. But the anti-COVID people were saying it so clearly, saying that it does not exist, it's just a flu. And they were having the loudest impact. So this, some people were just thinking, and said, this is a real problem. Scientists cannot explain us why we should be careful about COVID. So that means it's not just in Africa, it's even all over the world. And this day also me, I decided to change the way I communicate. Even if I'm going on conference, I know in the room there are some people from that are not from a background that are here. So I'm not talking to this person because I'm always making sure that this person who does not know anything about what I'm doing at least go home with something because the people who knows really understand, but people who doesn't know what he's doing here, give him something. So this has changed my approach in every single thing, and I try also to do it more and to learn more and share more in this way that people without doesn't have your background can take
yeah,
a message home from what you are saying
yeah,
because this is what we are supposed to do with science impact.
yeah. And I think it's also coming from the fear of oversimplification. The concepts we want to break down are too complex, right? I remember a colleague of mine from Turkey was visiting the lab in Germany, and she wanted to just be initiated to computer modeling of small molecules. This lady is trained as a synthetic chemist. She has made some compounds in the lab. She has tested them in some model that can predict if the compound can have activity against epilepsy. And she wants to understand how we design these nice pictures with proteins and compounds, hydrogen bonds, and all these things. And then she can now write her paper nicely and put these molecules, these pictures there, and say this molecule is active because it does this one is not active. She already has the activity data. She just wants to provide some added explanation so that she can have a paper published in the decent journal, right? Because most journals always want you to add some value to it by doing some computational modeling. And then she walks to me and says, Fidel, how can I get started? And then I pick a book from the library, because the lab has a library. Pick a book from there, the book where I started. I give it to her. Say, you can look through the first pages and then we're going to have a conversation next week. This lady was, the week she came back, she was almost depressed. And why? So many equations in the book. She says, Fidel, everywhere I just open, I just see equations and I'm thrown off. I said, why are you thrown off? She said, I'm not the math type. I was not good in mathematics from school. So by the time I open the textbook and I start seeing equations there, the first thing was introduction to force fields and all this rotational energy, translational energy, torsion angles and things. She was thrown off with all the cosines and the square root signs and things. So I said, you don't need to know all that. I realized I was the one going to cause her depression. She said, no, you don't need to know all that. I said, what do I need to know? I said, come, sit here. This is the software. Okay. Now, this is where you open your file. So which are the file we want to work on? This is the protein data bank. This is where I can find my protein. And this is how I can use keywords to find the protein I want to work on. I can use a keyword like epilepsy. I can use a keyword like, and then I combine keywords there, and I click, and she will start seeing different crystal structures and the ones that were co-crystallized and all that. Then we agree that this is the one we want to study because this one is co-crystallized with a ligand that's similar to her compounds. That most likely your compound may bind to the same protein. Then we download the protein. We go to this other software and we open the protein, and I start showing how do I prepare the protein. The protein comes without hydrogen, without protonation. So the first step I must do is to put protonation.
Mm.
And the reason why it doesn't have proton is because in the X-ray structure, the protein, the hydrogen atoms are not there. I explained to you, basically fundamental without any equations. Then when we finish the protonation steps, you say, what's the next step? I said, next step is to carry out a minimization. You say, why? Is it because sometimes the exact position in the X-ray structure is not exactly where the ligand is? So we have to adjust this. So we can't say, so in essence, so what does it do? I said, so the minimization step just refines your protein. Say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. You clean it up. I said, we're cleaning up your protein. Then we have cleaned up, we check, are there any small molecules there that are not relevant? You say, where do they come from? Say, they come from the process of making the crystal structure. See, like sulfate ions. Say, yeah, we remove them. We don't need them. It's about the water molecules. So they can be useful. See why? Sometimes they may help you to make hydrogen bond bridges. So you have to check. So how do you do? I say, check the ligand interactions. Then she checks, this one, yes. See, this one, yeah, it makes, this other one, no. This one. So we remove some of the waters and keep those few. You say, but what happens if I keep all my waters? Yeah, if you keep your waters, that's fine. But your calculation is going to take a longer time. So this is fundamentally. And then when we finish, we do the first simulation, and she's excited. And she said, when am I going to start docking my molecule? I said, not now. Say, how? So the first thing to do is to see if this method is able to reproduce, because you have a crystal structure. So let's remove the ligand in there and put it back and see if it's able to reproduce it. See how it can do it. So you save your ligand as a separate molecule and try to dock it. And then we did it. And after that, we superposed the X-ray structure with what she got. And then she see that, they're looking similar. So maybe your method can work. And the next thing is she made all her molecules. We start docking them one after another. And then she realized, because she came just for 3 months, and I was giving her a textbook to go and read.
So
The textbook is important for an expert.
yeah, so that means
But she's not coming to become an expert. She just wants to understand how our molecules work. That's all.
that's good.
So I realize that sometimes we the supposed experts are the ones killing the science, in the
Yeah.
sense that we don't communicate it properly. We expect everybody to become like us, whereas that's not the thing.
That's so important. And you just directly jump into the mentorship part, because what you explained us is a lesson of mentorship that you did with this colleague of you. And I want to know, what have you learned about being a mentor, and how can you empower those you mentor, not just follow your footsteps, but forge their own path and create their full legacy?
Yeah, for me to be an ideal mentor means to make the mentee to be all that which the mentee is meant to be. The idea of a mentor is not to make the mentee become like the mentor. Yeah. So it's a question of what are the qualities, the natural qualities that the mentee has that need to be refined. What are the potential, that the mentee has for development? What are the ambitions and the goals of the mentee? Because when all the mentee becomes is to become like the mentor, there has not been any progress overall. You have just made a clone of yourself. And if you clone yourself, you are already doing what you are doing, and you are so good at doing what you are doing. You don't need another you. Because another you will not add value to science. You need another mentee. And eventually, if your job is to create that environment, that thriving environment where the mentee can express themselves and become all that which they are made to be, eventually the mentee will do better than the mentor. And there's a way I identify a good mentee. The way I identify a good mentee is a mentee that has ambitions that go beyond the ambitions of the mentor. I remember a Kenyan lady I met, and I went to the university and gave a lecture. And after my lecture, we sat down to have lunch, and I mean, she's trained as a computational chemist from the United States. But unfortunately, after she returned, she settled down for family life, and then she didn't make some progress in science. And then when she knew she'd be reading my papers, when she knew I was in Kenya for a meeting, she did everything for me to give a lecture in the department, which I did with a lot of joy. It was a jam-packed hall. And I was so excited to talk to these young people and inspire them. And then she in her poster, she told students, come and see a man who publishes more than 20 articles in a year. And in Africa, when you publish a lot, means that your path towards becoming a professor is really settled and stuff. So I come and I give a lecture. And then during the lunchtime, she said her dream is that by the time she's retiring, her age index will be like mine. I said, so you're dreaming that your age index will become like mine. My dream is that your age index should become 10 times more than mine. If all your dream is to reach where I have reached, then there's not been any progress. Just to say some kind of, so in essence, I believe in creating the right environment where the mentees can do better. If, for example, the right environment will be having access to high-speed internet, or having access to an equipment that I never had when I was a PhD student, or having access to articles that I never had when I was a student, if that would mean getting them to have a recommendation letter or a support letter within 24 hours, whereas when I was a student, I would need like 1 month to get a recommendation letter. If it means, and one of the things I do now is I don't write all the recommendation letters. I either ask you to prepare a draft and I modify it, or I just ask ChatGPT to spew one for me. And ChatGPT does that in 2 minutes, and I just clean it up and adjust a few things, and that's it.
Yeah.
So why should I go and do it like 20 years ago, where the student will write it with a hand, and then I give it to a secretary to type it with errors in it, and I have to sit down, print it out, and be corrected with a pen again. The secretary go and retypes it, and that's how we got recommendation letters. But I don't think that's how it's done today. Right? So in essence, right now I see myself as a mentor is as a person who can facilitate things, who can speed up things. I more or less like create the atmosphere where before students will have to spend several hours trying I mean several months even. They just send some samples abroad for analysis to a lab. They don't know who is there and all that. Whereas with my connections, I can include this analysis of sample as part of my project, and it's all covered and all that. So it makes it go faster and easier. So that's what it means by being a mentor, like provide a shoulder on which others can lean and go faster. Yeah. It's not like, okay, I made it the hard way, so everybody must have it the hard way. No.
Do we want to start this debate because because we had some mentors who actually make it happen for us to be harder, especially in Cameroon. I think that
And what they gain by doing that.
I don't know, but I know that the time I was finishing my master, it was huge. It was really huge. You need a new generation like you and maybe me to come and clean this kind of behaviors, because in the past this is what was happening. Like mentors were there and they were not happy to share.
Okay.
So what's now, because I know there are many colleagues like have been frustrated and now maybe have uh, a bitter taste in their mind when they are thinking about education system, especially in Cameroon, and thinking about the future that they could have if they didn't have that mentor that was blocking them and all these things. So what you are saying is really the other part of, or the good part of what we should do in a good country or in a good mentor, but there are also other people who are not acting in the right way. So what are you telling to the mentee who are mentored by this mentor at the opposite of you?
Yeah. The good thing is that the Cameroon system, as I know it until now, the student or the mentee has the right to choose their mentor. So exercise choice is good choice as to which who should be your mentor. And there is a litmus test you can use for this. And the first and the simplest way to do it is what has become of the mentees, the former mentees of this person. And it's a very important litmus test. When I was applying for the Kalisus Juma Science Leadership Fellowship, there were many forms I needed to fill. One of them was a table that provides 5 of my mentees and where they are today. Of course, they have a possibility of checking. They check the former publications. So I said this one was my mentee. He's now an assistant professor in Howard University in the United States of America. This one is a former mentee. He's right now a Humboldt fellow in Germany. This one was my mentee. He just got a postdoctoral fellowship in a consortium, Human Genomics Consortium in Canada. This one was my mentee. He is now a senior lecturer at University of Yaoundé 1. See, this is what I'm talking about. So they want to see if you have been able to raise people who are independent along their own career path, along their own tangent, getting to where they are getting to. So in essence, if you have 5 mentees who are still working under your roof, taking to your dictates and your orders, and who will not submit a paper to a journal without you giving their okay. You have 5 mentees and none of them has published in a paper without you as a co-author. You are not giving birth. In fact, you have not, the word I will use is you are still breastfeeding. This is very, very important. A colleague of mine in Slovenia, he told me this story, and we were in the car driving in Germany, and he said he failed his application. He had a very solid European Union grant that failed, and the reason why one of the reviewers said is that he was an associate professor, but he had never published a paper without his PhD supervisor. That all his papers, even the ones where he's first author, even the ones where he's corresponding author, he still co-corresponded his PhD supervisor. So in essence, he said the word the reviewer used is that the guy is breastfeeding. And he took it to so much an insult that he said, okay, right now he's going to be doing his things himself. This is very important to know this. Until you have created independent beings who can lead their own teams and lead their own groups, you are not a mentor. I'm sorry to be critical, but this is a fact. If at my age, my mentor is about to retire, and I always have to go to him to get recommendation letters, to run to him to submit the paper, to get something's wrong somewhere. So how can I be a child and I'm raising other children?
He's very happy. He's very happy, Evan. He's very
By their
happy.
first generation and second generation
Yeah, 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 yeah.
kids and they're all
He's very,
around
very
him.
happy. Oh.
And he's happy because he's a village chief that they are submitting to him. No, that's not right. It, it is good for my mentor to sit down and discover that I've published a paper in Nature. Actually, we got one this year. And get to hear that I've received an RSC award. And get to see that I'm going to meet the Minister of Higher Education for inauguration of my center. Or to hear that I'm going to the Africa to sit in a panel in the African Union to discuss the future of medicinal plants in Africa. This is what my mentor is supposed to be. Just be happy to see. I mean, one of them told me recently that if I retired now, if I died now, I would not say I
It is.
failed
It
in
is.
life.
It
But
is
look,
how it's supposed to
just by
be.
looking at you,
Yeah.
I know that I've produced something that I can. You know what I'm saying? This is how it's supposed to be. Yeah. And just let me picture it in our African family. Imagine that you are married and you have a wife and kids, and you want to give your wife pocket money, and you go to your father, Daddy, I want to give my wife pocket money. How much money should I give her for pocket money? If your father is right thinking, he will go and check if you are okay up there. Or Daddy, we want to have another child. We don't know. Is it okay to have another child? The daddy says, yes. Are you sure you're okay? When you are saying I do, right? Do you take this lady as you are loving? And I do. It's because you are mature. You cannot be every crisis in your home. There's too much more salt in the food. You call your mom to come in to come. No, it doesn't make sense, right? So in essence, there's a level of maturity that by the time they're giving you a PhD and they're putting a cap on your head, they're expecting you to fly with your wings. And so I think that the human quality needed for a person to be independent should be incorporated in the mentor-mentee relationship. And one of the things my mentors
Yeah.
used to do as a PhD
Yeah.
student, I would submit my articles myself, submit it, prepare the revisions the queries. I will write text of the comments of my results myself.
Exactly.
My mentors
Exactly.
will
Yeah.
only improve it.
Yeah. Yes.
And so slowly and steadily, I learned the art of doing it. The
Mm.
first time I wrote a grant application, I didn't write by myself. My boss gave me a formal grant that was successful, and I took it, I started improving it, started looking at the language they use, how do they approach it, and all. It's important. There are students, students is too little.
Yeah.
How about senior lecturers who have never written a grant?
Even publication sometimes. Yeah.
They don't know how to write a
Yeah.
grant.
Sometimes.
So what was the mentor doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some have never prepared a PowerPoint presentation to go and give in a conference. They don't know how to prepare a poster. So what was the mentor doing? Because in this book I call Scientific Leadership, even talks about issues like how to prepare a poster, what are the catchy points that must appear on the poster, how to present the poster, how to correct a manuscript, how to submit, how to correct all those things. Students don't know them.
Yeah.
Their name only appears in
That's
PDF
what
of
the
an
mentor
article
taught
on their
them.
article.
So, meaning about your mentorship, I see that you had great mentor because all the time throughout your journey, you mentioned mentor, people who have maybe inspire you to take decision, go and learn. So, what was the most impactful piece of advice one of your mentor gave you, and how can you or young researcher ensure that they are open to the kind of mentorship that push them beyond their comfort zone?
I would say, if you permit me to say three. One, Professor Luc Mbaze. I'm eternally grateful to him. Luc Mbaze is the first mentor I ever had because my master's one he supervised. When I was a master's one student, I had some emotional problems that were going to break me down. And it had to do with the love relationship. And this lady was going to leave Cameroon and go to the United States. And I was not going to see her again. I was in the lab and I was not me. And I was like, I think I just finished master's one. I was still like cleaning up my work and to register for master's two, which never happened. He realized that I was disturbed and traumatized, and he called me. We used to stay many hours in the lab, and we live together. He would take me in his car and drop me off at my junction and go to his house. And in one of those occasions, he discovers I was down and asked me a question: "What's happening? You are not the Fidel I know." So he was interested in me as a person. It was very important for me. And then I told him what was happening, and he said, "Siki Arrivera, Arrivera." That sentence, if our transliterally meant what will happen. And he said that if our paths were not made to be together, like for this lady in question, no, there's no amount of effort I would do to change anything. And if she was not meant for me, there's nothing I can do about it. And if she was meant for me, there's no amount of worry I'm going to worry that will change things. So that strength came from him. He said, what will happen will happen. And for me, this is very important because that's what makes me know that my life doesn't depend on this situation. Yeah, it may happen, it may not happen. Then let me not live as though everything's about it, and let me not die because of that. The second mentor that sets that played a very important role, Professor Ifage, Simon Ifage, is still my consultant in the Center for Drug Discovery. Yeah, he was a full professor in Minnesota, University of Minnesota in the US, and packed his things and came to Cameroon. I mean, you have become assistant professor, associate professor, full professor in the United States with a big contract, big grants, lab, everything working well, and you pack your things, dismantle your lab, and come to Cameroon to come and take up a professorship in Cameroon. I read it from a newspaper, and I wanted to know meet this man. Because I know when you have made it over there, you remain there, the dollars are coming, and like when I met him, very simple man, and I want to know why he left the United States. And he told me something I never forget. He said, no one ever gets rich working for someone else. So to him, true riches is not in a number of dollars that enter your account. It's the joy of working for his home country, superseded everything else. And this is one of the things that drove me to return to Cameroon. Because after everything, there's nothing as joyous and you can derive satisfaction of giving back to your home nation that made you become what you are. Second thing. The third one is Professor Wolfgang Siepel, is my German professor. When I was done with my first visit, he asked me a question, just a question, during our last conversation. Say, why don't you use the models you have learned to screen the database of medicinal plants in Africa? It was a simple question. There was no database. If I told him there's no database, it means the project died, So that means I had to make one. Remember, I said every opportunity, every challenge is an opportunity. So there was none. I had to make one, which I did. And the database, when I started working in the database, I was working for Professor Luke Mbaze, Professor Simon Ifange, going all over the place, collecting data and putting this together. There were also distractions. One of the distractions was a colleague of one of my mentors who asked a question in French. If you permit me, may her soul rest in peace. He asked Professor Mbaze, Luc Mbaze, il says, Luc, il faut demander à ton fils, quand il va rassembler toutes les données des plantes médicinales en Afrique, et puis il va faire quoi de ça? So after you have collected all the data, because each level we collect data, we publish, we collect data, we publish. Say, what will happen after you have collected all the data? What will you do? That statement was intended to discourage, or it was intended to make me to think ahead. What would I do with all the data I'm putting together? Then my answer was, when we get to the bridge, we'll cross it. And I think we have already crossed the bridge.
Get to the bridge we cross it. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, Fidel. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing this piece of advice from your mentor.
yeah.
And I think you also share directly how can people who young researcher also push beyond the boundary, because you also reminded us about the challenge. When you say challenge, then there is an opportunity that you should directly turn into an opportunity. So that's what you mentioned about the question raised by your Dutch mentor that also trigger you, and now you are doing what he told you to do since right. So that's so inspiring, Fidel. I think I really love what you are saying in your story, and we have already talked about almost 2 hours. I have just a few last question now about your legacy. That I'm interested about your future. So if now you are thinking you are with us in 10 years from now, what legacy do you want to have left behind for the next generation of African scientists and even for Africa?
All right. I thank you for framing it properly. Because if I was going to talk about myself, I would think about my daughters. And I have two girls, and I've let them know that the brain capacity doesn't depend on gender. So let no one pull them down to think, oh, you need to be a man to make it. So I'm already a role model to my daughters. So they see me. The first girl says, I want to be like my dad. I want to become a professor. So to me, this is the big thing I have. I remember going to a conference in Italy, and I had this poster in my hand, and my wife accompanied me to the train station with my girl, and then while we're going, she asked me, Dad, what is this long thing? I said, it's a poster. And she says, what is it? What do you do with it? I said, when I get to the conference, I'll hang it. Then people will come and they'll be asking me questions, and I'll be explaining to them what is on the poster. And she said, can I look at it? I said, of course. She looked at it. Said, what is this? I said, it's a protein. This is how it looks like. And when I explained her some things, basically, and then I went to the conference, and while in the airport in Milan, we got a call from them, and it was like, what's the noise in the background? I said, they're announcing our flight, so I'm going to catch a flight very soon. And when I got home, she says, Dad, please, can I also produce it? Can you help me make a poster? So why? So that next time we are going to the conference, we can go together and I also present my poster. Somehow I think that I don't want to be that kind of scientist that is disconnected from the family. I think the family is a fundamental unit, and I'm very optimistic about my children becoming scientists. And if they will become scientists, or at least become what they are meant destined to be, I'll be very happy about that. But that I would have inspired them positively. So I don't want to be remembered as an excellent scientist. I want to be remembered as a good husband and a wonderful father. That's very important. Now, talking about in 10 years' time, for the Center for Drug Discovery, which we are starting off, my dream is that each lab will have its own PI. Right now, I'm the PI of the center, but then we are having 5 labs, and I don't think I'm going to be the PI of the 5 labs for the next 5 years. Doesn't make sense. If that's going to be, I prefer not to be a scientist. I prefer not to be that one that whose signature must be on everything. I want to see in the next 5 years, next 10 years, PIs emerge who have their own labs, they're autonomous, they have their students to supervise them. I must not be a co-supervisor in every thesis. I must not be a co-PI in every grant application. I must not be the one to present the center all the time. I think this time is a time for me to begin to clone myself, to begin to impact other young scientists around me, so that when I'm prepared for retirement, I should rather be finding time to visit my grandchildren than to be all the time in the lab. You know what I'm saying? So this is the dream I have, that African scientists can discover the skills they have. They can build their own niche. They can impact their own environment, and they can have impact beyond their immediate surrounding.
Thank you so much, Fidel. So we are now closing. I want to know this last question that we are used to ask to all our guests. If you were to write a book about your life, what will be the title of this book? It always gives the same impression, so I'll let you think. You have to say it in less than one sentence.
You can make it.
So why this title?
If I expand the sentence slightly, you can make it irrespective of your circumstances.
Can you explain to us why now?
Why? Because I don't think I was very special. I just think I grew as a normal child, and the opportunities came, and I took advantage of them. Took the opportunity that came, and I studied under difficult conditions like everybody else. As a so 700 people in one classroom, listening to one lecturer on a microphone that was sometimes failing, and sometimes the fans are producing more heat than they are taking the heat away, and the classrooms are noisy and crowded, and students are screaming and shouting at the professors. And this is what you studied like only one many years ago. And so if I would come out of that kind of uh, classroom setting to be the first African to win the RSC Natural Product Reports Emerging Investigator Lectureship, I would say that if I could do it, anybody can do it. So you don't need to give excuses that the circumstances in which you studied or the environment was not very conducive. So that's why you did not become what you were destined to become. I believe anybody can become what they're destined to become. All it takes is to be resilient, take advantage of the opportunities, and see the challenges that come and use them as stepping stones.
Thank you, Fidel. Now, 3 words or 3 skills that any young scientist need to have now.
Resilience is very important. Open-mindedness. First thing is to be open-mindedness. To be open-minded, you have to be resilient. Don't give up, and you must have a clear vision. You must have a clear vision of where you are going to, and when you have a clear vision where you are going to, no circumstance is going to discourage you.
Thank you so much, Fidel. I really enjoyed the discussion. I wish you all the best for your career and especially for your center in Cameroon. We are expecting the great discovery that you are going to make there. Thank you so much
Thank you
again,
very
Fidel.
much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For me, it's an opportunity to be interviewed. I really like the conversation as well. I'm looking forward to listen to the full recording.
Thank you, Fidel. Thank you.
Bye.